What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/ProRevenge. This story's called, "He Ruined My Sister's Only Birth Experience, so I made sure he'd never forget her." Obligatory apology for formatting as I'm on mobile. Kinda my revenge, kinda my sister's. Both of us really proud. This is gonna be long, so till the bottom. Here's our cast. Voices to be determined because I'm kinda tired. My sister, we'll call her Sarah for the story. Sister's ex-boyfriend, Paul. Ex-boyfriend's new wife, Jane. Ex-boyfriend's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe. Oldest brother, Zeke. Our parents, and me. When I was 14 and my oldest sister, Sarah, was 22, we found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. But you might want to fix that wording. They immediately got engaged and they were really happy. For a time, Sarah had a horrible pregnancy. About 16 to 18 weeks in, the wonder of creating a human life evaporated within her. She developed hyperemesis, which, if you don't know, is really bad morning sickness. She was constantly in pain, she developed gestational diabetes, and just all around hated the experience. Around this time, Paul, the then fiancé, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe the argument was, "Your body is built to do this. It can't be that bad." Sarah was due around Valentine's Day, and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were very excited, both about the grandkid and the fact that he could be born on a holiday. She was very against that and really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday, even one as small as Valentine's Day. Her birthday sometimes falls on Easter and she hates it because it might make him feel that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, "Well, if you name him Valentine or Valentino, then that'll make the day even more special to him." Again, sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky. He'd be bullied for it, and just really didn't like the name Valentino. Paul loved it, but he agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February, and she was ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest because while standing or walking, her blood pressure took unexpected spikes and dips. I look back now and goodness do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day because, again, she didn't want him born on a holiday. Unfortunately, births happen when they happen, and that baby was going to come on Valentine's Day whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers, and Paul, who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in, but wouldn't because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth. Whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mom and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest 2 brothers, while the oldest, Zeke, stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labor, my little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency cesarean section and while doing the operation, discovered the back of her uterus, facing her spinal cord, had a very large and very severe, thankfully non-cancerous, tumor. When I say large, I mean it was twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody had noticed it on an ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumor, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now, while Sarah was in for surgery, Paul was taking care of everything baby-related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14-year-old self's memory, I remember him being suitably distraught, but I didn't really pay him much mind and spent my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeke, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and make sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filling out the baby paperwork on his own, in my brother's words, like he had not a single worry in his mind. Zeke asked Paul why he didn't wait for Sarah to fill out the paperwork, as she should have been put out of surgery within the hour. And Paul said that he just wanted her to get rest and heal. That checked out with Zeke, as he was 16 and didn't know any better at the time. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. No, he wouldn't. He knows how much she hates that name, and still, she'd need to sign the paperwork too. Well, my fellow peoples of Reddit and YouTube, I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew, that was born on Valentine's Day, was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still, to this day, don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about the name. He had even picked out a different one with my sister. And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges because his parents were witnesses to her signing the papers, even though they only got there at the last minute. So Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She was willing to do split custody with him because that's her son's father and she wants the kid to know him. But Paul vanished and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us. Until a mutual friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding pictures 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid, but there wasn't much she could do, so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later. This is where the revenge starts. So Sarah has been a single mother for the past 6 years and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career, I've been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local Great Clips. I'm working one day, and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife herself. I take her back for a trim, and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up because a mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid that he's been infrequently paying child support for. She's in the dark on it all. I told myself not to be an ass and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of our conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant, but it was hard. Her husband was so unsympathetic, big shocker, and she was due in 10 weeks and they still hadn't picked out a name for their baby girl. Ladies and gentle peoples, this was my chance. I asked what kind of name she was looking for, and she said, "I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Brain to Leahy." Brain to Leahy? You know the ones I'm talking about. And Paul had suggested so many already, and she didn't like any of them. So I, a conniving little weasel I am, said, "What about Sarah?" My sister's name isn't actually Sarah. She was named after an older family member that had passed not long after she was born. But there was no female equivalent for his name, so our parents created one. It's a beautiful name and just what Jane was looking for. She loved it. She stuck by it. And I found out by stalking her Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it, and that was their daughter's name. Now, Paul has a daughter with his ex's name to remind him every day about her. And to remind him to pay his friggin' child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now with a new name and no contact with his biological father, though we do still sometimes call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it but doesn't want to bring it to school, so it's staying a family nickname. Sarah pretends to hate when we call him that in a joking way. As long as he likes it, she doesn't have a problem with it. And she's seeing a new guy who's really great and like a father to Val. Edit! Gosh, now I know what they mean about RIP inbox. I'm crying because laughing hard is crying inducing. I'm tired. Thank you to the kind strangers for all the awards, especially the gold. We did not expect this to blow up like it did. Val want to let all you other Valentine's babies know that he feels your pain. Wow, that was quite the story and a really good one. I'm glad things worked out in the end, and I absolutely love that Paul's other kid is named after your sister. That is some poetic justice if I've ever seen any. What's the correct word? This story's called Threaten Me on a Dating App? Watch while your life crumbles around you. Obligatory latalafatapa, or the intellectuals might say, long-time lurker, first-time pooper. Bear with me, as this might get long. I'm also on mobile, so excuse the formatting. My revenge came in 2 parts, one petty and one pro. The following contains graphic details of various kinds of bodily harm. If that bothers you, skip the background and just read the revenge. We have strong stomachs here at Daily Dose, so I'm gonna read the backstory. Yes, I'm badass. When I was 19 or 20, I'm 25 now, I met a guy on Tinder. Let's call him Brad. Brad and I didn't get off to a great start, but I had no idea how bad it was going to get. At first, it just seemed like we were incompatible, as he was pushy and rude and I take no feces. If it had stopped there, I wouldn't be here right now, but it didn't stop there. Once I made it clear that I found Brad repulsive and wanted nothing to do with him, his messages took a turn. He threatened to stalk, violate in a horrible manner, kidnap and murder me, along with some gory details about gouging out my eyes and defiling my corpse. Particularly disturbing was his explicit desire to strangle me and watch the life leave my eyes. He also managed to find my home address 3 hours away from the city we were in and threatened to come find me. As a side note, it was my dad's house, and some small part of me wanted to see exactly how bad it would turn out for him if he showed up there. Of course, I warned my dad and gave him a picture of the guy. I also took screenshots of everything he sent me. The petty. Being a young woman with no idea whether this madman would actually go to lengths to find me, I called the cops. When they came, they looked at the messages, told me it constituted terroristic threat, but also told me there wasn't much they could do unless Brad actually showed up. They did take down his details, including where he worked, which is listed in his bio. This will be important later. From what I understand, the cops went to Brad's workplace to speak to him, and he refused, so they left. Nothing ever came of it. For the second part of petty, I found his Facebook. Again, don't put your freaking workplace on all of your social media. I snooped around and managed to find a couple of his family members. I sent them all the screenshots along with an explanation of what happened. I didn't hear back for a few days, but when I did, it was from Brad's mom. She apologized profusely on behalf of her son and told me they were driving in from Brad's hometown 3 states away to confront him. She asked me not to warn him of this advance, and obviously I agreed. I don't know what became of this, but I hope he got a good Southern style ass whooping. Now for the pro. A few years later, when Brad probably thought he was in the clear, something jogged my memory of what he did, and I decided it was time for him to face some actual consequences. I made a Facebook post including his picture and bio, all of the screenshots, and a message warning people in our area and asking them to share it around so other women would know what they were dealing with. 2 days later, Facebook took it down, but the damage had already been done. 3,000 shares and many messages later, all of that information had made its way to his company's Facebook page. From what I understand, they were absolutely flooded with messages about Brad and his behavior. They responded with a stock message about how they were dealing with it according to their policies. This was disheartening, as I assumed they were just gonna blow it off. By this point, Brad had been working for them for at least 4 years. However, I soon learned this was not the case. Several women from his company messaged me to thank me for coming forward and exposing the kind of person they were working with. It was through one of these women that I found out what happened to good old Brad. He was called into a meeting with his boss, HR, and the CEO of the company. As a side note, this is a multinational company, and the CEO is a woman. Oh boy. They did not take the situation lightly. Within 2 days of posting on Facebook, Brad had been fired and escorted off the premises by armed security. In the end, Brad got what he deserved, and now he has a massive blank spot on his resume, as this company was his first job out of college, and he can no longer get a letter of recommendation from them. As far as what became of him, I don't know. I never heard from him again. Though I did get a message from his grandma telling me that what I was doing was illegal. First off, good freaking job exposing that creepo creep man. Also, cool CEO lady for coming down and handling that situation in person, just so he gets a real idea of how screwed he is and how much of a dirtbag. Like, those are disgusting things. Yeah, a lot of girls on, especially Tinder, because Tinder guys are usually like sleazebags. And then Bumble's a little bit better because Bumble's like Tinder for like attractive people, and girls have to message the guy first. So actually, I want the ladies in the comments down below to tell me their experiences with creeps on dating apps. I'm sure they're rampant. Okay, last up that I can go to sleep. Can't drive through that. Back in 2004, we had those big plastic round garbage bins in our back alley. About 6 of them down every alley in my neighborhood. They were huge, about 4 foot tall and 4 foot wide at the top. They got emptied every Thursday around 8 in the morning. I lived a half a block down the alley from the local bar, and every few weeks I'd go out in the morning to see all the bins knocked down. Some drunk idiot was driving his beater home around the time the bar closed at 2 a.m. I figured he was hitting them on purpose just for laughs. Once winter came, the plastic got more brittle, and every bin that was hit got cracked and or destroyed. The city never did anything other than just replace the bins, but it would take a few weeks, and it was irritating to have to pick them up all the time or use a farther away bin because the nearby one was toast. So this continued for months, and winter gets cold here in Canada. We had a solid week of -40. One Saturday night, I saw red and blue lights flashing through my curtains. I walked out to see a completely totaled mid-80s Buick wrapped around a bin. One of my neighbors decided to fill the bin with water, which froze into a solid block of ice. I don't know for sure which neighbor did it, but they are absolute heroes in my mind. Guy got arrested, so I assume he was charged with drunk driving at least. Tow truck took away what was left of his car, but the bin stayed there for a couple of months as a monument to stupidity filled with ice because it was too heavy to move and also wasn't in the least bit damaged by the collision. See, this story's wholesome in my mind. I know a few of y'all were saying that you like the idea of having a wholesome story at the end of every episode, and I might try that, but that's gonna be hard to maintain, to be honest. But I feel like this was wholesome, just like some cute little Christmas special of a TV show. Just like add Christmas stuff to it, and like Christmas bells, and like Frank Sinatra's in there somehow. Christmas is nice. Alright guys, I'm gonna go to bed. You guys watch more videos and subscribe to Daily Dose of Memes. I love you. Goodbye and good night. Or good morning. Happy birthday. Merry Hanukkah.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.